Okay, guys, welcome to Mr. Saylor's very first, I don't know what you can call this, but it's my first lecture online. Hopefully, you guys have a chance to watch this. You can watch it as much as you want. Hopefully, you can see the screen that is in front of me. So, since most of you missed class today because of MUN, I decided to record my lecture, and you guys can watch it as much or as little as you need to help you prepare for the test. Okay, so we are going to look at observational learning and latent learning today. So if you look at the screen right here, we are going to talk about social learning theory. The main person we need to know for this is a man named Albert Bandura. There is a movie that you guys are going to watch as well, which I think will help you to understand this theory. So we've already talked about classical conditioning and operant conditioning. On the other side of the worksheet that I gave you on Wednesday, there's a short lab if you have time to do it. Several of you got to do it with me in class today. Okay, so here we go. What is cognitive learning? So the basics of it are that it is insight learning, or we call latent learning. These are the various kinds of cognitive learning. So let's start with cognitive learning. Cognitive learning is learning that depends on mental activity that is not directly observable. So it involves such processing as attention, expectation, thinking, and memory. Okay, so other things that go along with this are the studies of a man named Edward Tolman's research on maze learning in rats. So we'll get to that in just 1 second, but latent learning is learning that takes place before the subject realizes it and is not immediately reflected in behavior. So what Edward Tolman's research did was his goal was to basically put rats in a box and to test in a maze and see how they improved finding their way through the maze each day. Tolman allowed rats to explore a maze once a day for several consecutive days. For rats in group A, food was placed in the goal box on each trial. So rats gradually improved their performance so that by the end of the experiment, they made only 1 or 2 mistakes as they ran through the maze. So if there was no food at the end of the maze, the rats were actually less likely to find their way. They needed a objective, something to gain from it, and they would actually learn through experiences. And the more they did it, the more they were able to succeed in finding their way with very few mistakes through this complicated maze. Okay, so on the contrary, insight learning is when learning seems to occur in sudden flash as elements of a situation come together. So learning sets refer to increasing effectiveness at problem solving through experience. Organisms, so learn how to learn. So it's that kind of like, that can be that aha moment when you are in class and finally you didn't get it, and finally you understand the problem set. This might happen in a math class where you haven't understood a theory for a very long time, and then at one moment all of the learning just seems to come to you and you just get it. But it may not have been gradual. It may have just finally come to you. It may have taken several different approaches for you to understand it, but then you finally made it to what you were looking for. So, social and cognitive theory, observational learning. So individuals learn through imitating others who receive rewards and punishments. Learning a behavior and performing it are not necessarily the same thing. So we're going to give you some examples here very soon. So the first tenet in this learning theory is response consequences, such as rewards or punishments, influence the likelihood that a person will perform a particular behavior once more. So if they're rewarded for a particular behavior or punished, that will have a great influence on whether they'll do that behavior once again. Tenet 2, humans can learn by observing others, which is what we're going to talk about very soon. In addition to learning by participating in an act personally, learning by observing others is called vicarious learning, the concept of vicarious learning is not one that would be subscribed to by classical behaviorists. Okay? So it is when you're watching your parents do something and you're not necessarily it's not necessarily in school, it's not the learning that you would classically think of as learning, but a lot of who you are may come from observational learning of others. Tenet 3, individuals are most likely to model behavior observed by others they identify with. So identify with here means that people you understand, people you connect with. Maybe that is your parents, maybe that's a teacher, maybe that's a superstar singer of some sort, somebody that you can relate to. Identification with others is a function of the degree to which a person is perceived to be similar to oneself, in addition to the degree of emotional attachment that is felt towards an individual. So do you feel close to that person? Are you emotionally attached? A lot of times you are emotionally attached most to your parents. Going back to the development unit. So these are where we learn a lot of, this is how we become a lot of who we are. So next slide, we are going to introduce one of the most famous psychologists, a man named Albert Bandura, and his observational learning with the Bobo doll experiment. David is entering the classroom, so you will see this with that. So at this point, I would ask you to pause this video, and there is a link for the Bobo doll experiment. So please watch that video. It's about 4 or 5 minutes, I believe, okay? So pause me right here. I know I'm too good to stop, but pause me. Okay. David, I can't pause this, so I have to keep going, so you have to come back in a little bit. Okay? Sorry. Okay, I'm paused. And I'm back. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So in the Bobo doll experiment that you saw, you might have seen something like this. The experiment consisted of 72 children in total. 24 of them were in the aggressive role model stage, and 24 were in the non-aggressive role model. Which one is the control group? Which one is the experimental group? Actually, and we have the control group. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? Okay, anyways, we have 2 independent variables here, and our dependent variable is to see which one is the most aggressive here. So we have female, males, and we have the boys and girls broken up. So what were the results of this experiment? Children exposed to the aggressive model were more likely to act in physical aggressive ways than those who were not exposed to the aggressive model. Boys averaged 38.2 with 12.7 for girls. So what does that tell us about boys versus girls when it comes to aggression? Are boys more prone to be aggressive than girls? Is that something evolutionary in who we are? Children exposed to the aggressive models were more likely to engage in novel, hostile acts, so meaning that they had never done such a hostile act ever again. It's completely new to them. Children are more influenced by same-sex models, meaning that if it's a male hitting the Bobo doll, it's more likely that a young child that is a boy would most likely hit it. It's least likely if a man hits the doll, a little girl would be less likely to imitate the man than she would be another female. Results show that boys exhibited more aggression when exposed to aggressive male models than boys exposed to aggressive female models. When exposed to aggressive male models, the number of aggressive instances exhibited by boys averaged 104 compared to 48.4 aggressive instances exhibited by boys who were exposed to aggressive female models. Interesting, I think. I hope you guys make some kind of connection to this. Why were boys more likely to be shown here? Are there any confounding variables? What bias might there be in this study? Has this been replicated more recently? Okay, so learning by observing. The likelihood of acting on vicarious learning changes when we see the consequences of other people's behavior. Vicarious reinforcement or vicarious punishment affects the willingness of people to perform behaviors they learn by watching others. So, are you being reinforced on these behaviors that people are supporting your behaviors to do these things? We are more likely to exhibit these behaviors if they are reinforced. So as teachers, when we see you guys do something that may not be a good behavior, we don't necessarily want to punish you, but we don't want to reinforce that behavior in any way. So if you call out in class and everyone laughs at you, depending on who you are, you might take that as a good thing and you are being reinforced for your behavior rather than realizing that it might not be a good behavior. So the other thing we're going to take a look at is live versus virtual models. So a virtual model is something that you might see on TV or you might read about in the newspaper, while a live model is someone like your parents or your wonderful, excellent teachers. Okay, so I'm sure you guys can think of some other live versus virtual models. Take a second right now, pause me, and think about it for a second. Who is a live model? Who is a virtual model? You better be paused. Okay, come back, tell me. Okay, good thinking. I agree with you. Okay, this is our very last slide for today. It's a very short lecture for today. This is all about the mirror neurons. So the last little bit says that neuroscientists discovered that mirror neurons in the brain of animals and humans that are active during observational learning. So remember, this is the areas for pain and empathy. So what do these necessarily have to do with observational learning? What about, so maybe if we experience if we're observing something that looks painful, that is what we're learning, that action might be painful. So if we saw someone fall off of a chair and hit their head, we are observing this behavior, realizing, hey, that looks actually dangerous and maybe I shouldn't do it in the future. So while empathy, you might, let's think of an example for empathy. If you see someone that, if you observe somebody maybe in pain, you can learn to empathize for them. That's not really a good example, I'm sorry. It's the end of the day, I'm struggling here. See if I can think of a better one for you here soon. Maybe in class I can pull one out. So this is the PowerPoints for today that you missed in class. If you have any further questions, please come and ask me during class or email me. I will be on email. Okay guys, that is all. I will see you guys tomorrow.